Mayor Colbert, we are live and the meeting is already also being recorded, so we are good to go.
Okay, thank you. The October 28th PCAC meeting is called to order. We are working under the resolution finding need to conduct the meeting by electronic communication means during governor's declared state of emergency during COVID-19 pandemic. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, and I will now call.
Can we mute ourselves if we're not speaking? Sorry, Chair, but I'm getting a lot of background noise from somebody.
Thank you. If you are not speaking, can you please mute yourself? Thank you, everybody. I'm going to call attendance now. So please, because I can't see everyone, just go ahead and say here if you're here. You can unmute to say here. Councilmember Miles.
Present.
Okay. Board Chair Garvey.
Here.
Supervisor Alcorn.
Here.
Okay. Supervisor Saines. Okay, Supervisor Saines is not here. Supervisor Franklin.
Madam Chair, the Supervisor Saines is here.
Oh, okay. Hello. Thank you. Supervisor Franklin.
Present, and there is a lot of background noise.
Okay. I'll just remind everybody, just turn the mute on and off. Good. Vice Mayor Bennett Parker.
Here.
Councilmember Duncan.
Yeah, I'm here.
Councilmember Steele.
Here.
Councilmember Davis Younger.
Present.
Councilmember Banks. Councilmember Banks. Councilmember Phillips.
Here.
And Councilmember Fox.
Here.
Okay, did I miss anyone? Okay, excellent. I was not at the last meeting, but are there any changes to the summary notes of the last meeting that anybody wants to make? Okay, then all in favor of those minutes, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay,
I
those
abstain.
pass.
Okay.
Right, and I abstain also, thank you. Okay, so tonight's meeting, and I have another meeting just to let everybody know at 7:30, but I'm in my office and I'm just going to run down the hall. So I can be here till 7:25. So we'll try and get finished till by 7:25. All right. So the agenda for tonight, you might be looking at it right now. There's a transaction vision and goals. Mr. Jasper, are you with us?
Yes, good evening, Chair Colbert, members of the committee. I hope you can hear me okay. I do hear a bit of background noise myself, so I hope I can talk over that. We have one action item for you to consider this evening related to transaction, and there is associated discussion with this item as well. So Haroon, if you could advance to the next slide, please. I just wanted to kick off with some reminders of the definitions or guidelines about the terminology I'm using this evening. I want to talk about the vision and to a certain extent the goals, so they're highlighted in blue, and these are, as I'm sure you're familiar with your own plans, kind of very aspirational statements about a future vision or a future condition that you'd like to see for the region, and the goals kind of drill down a little bit into the priorities and outcomes for the region, and then in more detail we have objectives and performance measures. And for performance measures, we have weights as well to kind of reflect their relative priority to one another. For the purposes of this discussion, I'm really going to focus on the vision and to a certain extent the goals. And so objectives, measures and weights that are highlighted or shown in a greyish font here, and as the note at the bottom says, these will not be finalised until probably a year from now. So I'll mention them in passing and to provide some context, but we're not looking for any particular action, or we're not looking for any action and not even that much in the way of discussion either. But for context, I just wanted to make that clear. So Haroon, if you could go to the next slide, please. So this is showing the current vision and goals and objectives and measures and weights for the current version of Transaction, which was adopted in October of 2017. I'm including this for reference. As the discussion goes forward, it may be useful to kind of jump back to this slide just to see what the current approach has been, but there's no action or discussion related specifically to what's on the screen now. This is just really, as I say, for the context, since this has already been approved by the authority for the current version of Transaction. But we are taking this opportunity, since Transaction is only updated once every 5 years, to review all of the vision statement, goals, etc., as we move through this next update cycle for Transaction. So, and a lot has changed in the 5 years since we got the certainly the vision adopted. So next slide, please. So there are some elements that we're proposing that would be new for this iteration of Transaction. Just want to touch on these now before I explain what we are proposing in detail. The first one is equity. As I mentioned at your last meeting, we've not explicitly addressed equity in Transaction before, although we have kind of perhaps, if I could say, tangentially incorporated it, but not kind of front and center. So when we talk about equity in transportation, we're really talking about the concept of fairness in mobility and accessibility to meet the need of the region, or probably more significantly sub-regions, or even at the community level within the region. So that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish by addressing equity, and the sorts of things that could mean, as listed in the second bullet here, to facilitate social and economic opportunities by providing equitable levels of access. And I won't read all of this, but towards the end, there's some examples of potentially underserved populations that equity measures or process could address. So equity, we feel, is kind of like a major new area to address. And at your meeting last month, we did get a broad endorsement from members that this was a direction that you would like to go in. A couple of additional proposed elements, concepts of sustainability and resiliency, which are kind of related but also different. So for sustainability, the focus here really is on meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So we talk about resources. What we're trying to accomplish here is to have a sustainable approach to transportation that doesn't preclude the option of future generations to determining their direction with regard to needs and sustainability. And oftentimes sustainability is referred to by the three pillars of economic, environment, and social, or kind of put slightly differently, using literally the three Ps, profit, planet, and people. Resiliency is to do with having a transportation system that can move people in the face of one or indeed multiple extreme obstacles to normal function. So incidents and planned events are things which kind of generally are short term in nature. To a certain extent, severe weather can be as well, although if you lose power and so on for weeks at a time, then the effect could be more long lasting. And that could kind of roll over to affect equipment and indeed infrastructure failures. If we have a tanker truck fire on a bridge that takes out the bridge for many months, then that's kind of a larger scale. A changing climate is another area related to resiliency, and in some ways the pandemic is an example of something that's very extreme. The resiliency effects of the pandemic are kind of more to do with the resiliency to kind of for economic productivity and education to continue. So it's not so much a transportation resiliency, although there is a transportation impact associated with that. Next slide, please. We're seeing some grey boxes on my screen. Oh, thank you. So on the next slide, I'll show the proposed vision for you to consider. Haroon, can you advance that? Yeah, it's like you've pressed the wrong button there. Okay, while Haroon's bringing that up, we are proposing a new vision statement and illustrating that with some potential new goals, and that's what we're going to see in this next slide. So, thank you, Haroon. The proposed vision is somewhat similar to at least the first part of the current vision. Northern Virginia will plan for and invest in, and then safe, equitable, sustainable, and integrated multimodal transportation system that does three things: enhances quality of life, strengthens the economy, and builds resilience. So you can see we've highlighted the words equitable, sustainable, and resilience to reflect what I mentioned on the previous slide. I've also highlighted safe. Safety was included in the previous iteration, but at a kind of at the objective and the measure level, we felt that it was appropriate and equivalent to elevate safety to the vision statement alongside equitable, sustainable, and then the reference to building resilience. So that's the proposed vision, and then underneath that you see potential goals, which we're happy to take reaction on. So these three potential goals basically pick up the three final lines of the proposed vision statement above. So the first one speaks to mobility and quality of life. The second one speaks to accessibility and the regional economy. And the third one speaks to resiliency and the operational performance of the system under extreme conditions. To the right side of the table here, you see potential objectives and measures. Illustrative only, these are really only categories. They're not even actually fleshed out as real objectives and measures. But the intent here is to show how we could kind of map objectives and subsequently measures back to the goals, which in turn map back to the vision statement. And one thing I noticed here, we've listed the number of measures that we're looking for, and it adds to 8. Previously, or at least currently in transaction, we have 15 performance measures, and it's been a widespread concern to us and others that 15 measures is really a lot of measures for this sort of document. So we are looking to constrain the number of measures ultimately, not now, but ultimately to 8, which will kind of introduce some interesting trade-offs subsequently. If we decide to add something, then the conversations kind of probably have to go along the lines of, well, what do we take out in order to add something different? But that's not a discussion for this evening. That will come later. Haroon, if you could advance, I've got 2 more slides. just to kind of restate, we got one action item tonight which relates to that previous slide, which is to request the committee approves the vision statement, or alternatively suggest something different. So that's what we'll come back to. But just the last couple of slides, wanted to just introduce on this slide a kind of an explanation of how we propose incorporating the vision and goals into the transaction analysis, so you can see how this kind of will play out in practice. We're looking at two complementary approaches. The first one is performance-based planning, which is kind of the traditional approach, which looks at measures that kind of tie back into the vision, and then we run the models and we see how different variations of future build networks perform as we change the emphasis on different measures. So that's fairly quantitative in nature. It's model-based, particularly for mobility and accessibility measures, but it does enable us to kind of potentially compare, looking at different measures for underserved population versus the population at large in the region. The other piece of this is looking at what we call a core value approach. And this is kind of more holistic and overarching. And as such, it tends to be kind of broader, but somewhat more qualitative, although it could still be data driven. But the core values here would be some of those words are highlighted in yellow previously: safety, equity, sustainability, and indeed the integrated multimodal system. And with a core value approach, what we would really do more at the front end of the transaction analysis than the back end is to look to see how we can build a future network that actually addresses these concepts of safety and equity, etc. So it has the advantage that it applies across everything. So if there was, say, if we just use the performance-based planning approach only, then that would kind of really force us to come up with specific measures for safety, equity, sustainability, and so on. Whereas if we adopt the core value approach for those items in particular, then we can say take a safety-oriented view across everything that's in transaction, an equity view across everything that's in transaction. So it gives us these two things together. It's quite a powerful way to look at this. So this is kind of like a process type of thing. It's something that our technical advisory committee focused on much more when we met with them last week than what I'm going to talk to you about next. So we can go to the final slide. So our technical advisory committee, when asked the question, what are the most urgent equity issues pertinent to the region that should be considered in transaction, didn't really give us anything back, and which is fine, because the committees are designed in a way to give different inputs on different topics. So we're hoping this evening that if there's time, and if there's not, then subsequent to this meeting, to give us some guidance before we start developing any measures over the next 12 months as to what you consider are the most urgent equity issues, or at least equity issues you would like to put into a short list of things that we need to build into both the process and the analysis that relates to transaction. So this is something I'd like to come back to in just a few moments. But first, Madam Chair, if we can go back to I'm happy to take any questions on any of this right now, but okay. There's an action item before you on the vision statement. So maybe suggest we should start there and then come back to the discussion on equity as time allows. So if you could go back a couple of slides to the proposed vision statement, and I'll hand back to you.
Okay, excellent. So, right, that is our action item tonight, to approve the vision statements. What comments or questions does anyone have on these, just for general discussion or for Mr. Jasper? Does anyone have any
I do.
comments? Yes, please speak.
Okay, so I understand the inclusion of equity in this statement, and Mr. Jasper just indicated that so far there's been no ideas that have been forthcoming. So would it be a good idea for us to take that concept back to our communities and get some feedback before we actually try to define it here.
I mean, we can. I can let Mr. Jasper speak to that. I think I don't see it as exclusive. Like, I think we could probably approve it, but also, you know, and then next week talk about all the different equity. I don't think unless everybody wants to wait. I mean, we could do
I'm trying to get an idea of what it means. I get a 30,000-foot view of what it means, of course.
Sure.
But what does it mean to transaction? And
Yeah,
so maybe I understand everything else, but
yeah.
when he came forth with a statement that we didn't quite have any input on that yet, that kind of made me question that.
No, that makes sense. I understand that. Mr. Jasper, do you have a comment on that?
No. I mean, Councilwoman Fox, that's a perfectly reasonable comment. I think I would kind of agree with Chair Cabell that it doesn't approving this vision statement does not preclude anything other than what it really does is it forces us to kind of address the equity issue if and it's even if the word equitable was not in this vision statement, we probably still would look at it. But I think it's really sending a message, since this vision statement has to be approved by the authority before we can really do very much work in transaction, at least from the analytical point of view. For us, you know, getting a buy-in at the get-go that equity has to be addressed is a great starting point, but it doesn't preclude any options going forward in terms of equity. And I was not criticising the committee by saying that there was nothing before us, no suggestions before us. We only introduced the topic to you last month, and we didn't expect anything from you last month. And But I mean, I understand if you want to go back to communities and get feedback on what equity issues should be addressed. I think that's fine, but I don't think that precludes kind of making a commitment to equity within this vision statement.
Okay, I totally understand that. So it's okay for us to go ahead, go back to our communities, present this to them, and get their feedback.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
How does everyone else feel about? I mean, we can approve the statement, the vision now, go back, still get the information from our communities and come back. Or Mr. Jasper, I don't know what the timing is. We could wait to vote on the vision and goals for next month, but I don't know if that fits in the timeline.
It's not that time sensitive, and we're not looking for action on the goals anyway at this point. If we can bring this to the authority at the December meeting, that would be fine. But if it spills over into early next year, it's not on the critical path towards successful completion of transaction. But it's just something that if there's a consensus and a desire to move forward, it means we can kind of move beyond vision to start thinking about goals and then have that discussion with you subsequently. But we won't really get to the measures themselves, detailed measures, like I say, until probably a year from now. We do want to get public and stakeholder input on this as well, on the details of measures and so on. And we won't be going to the public for public engagement until late spring, early summer at the earliest of next year.
Okay, I totally understand that.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It's Libby. Is that okay?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Let me.
Chair Garvey, do you want me to, maybe if I mute? Well, okay.
Press the space bar and it's not working. Hold on. That's probably better. Ooh, not.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening.
Can somebody unmute me?
Okay, do you want to try again?
Yeah, is that better? No. You know what? I'm going to type something into the chat. How's that?
Okay.
Yep.
Let me see if I can chat.
Madam Chair, this is Kron from Loudon. May I speak while we wait for, I guess, Chair Libby to get situated?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, please do speak.
All right, thank you, ma'am. May I suggest, I think the proposed vision, to me, it looks fine, and then maybe we can go back to our individual bodies and maybe discuss a little bit more for the goals, and then come back in November, and if anybody has any recommended changes to submit those before the November meeting, so then that way staff can have it all lined up and we can talk about the goals a little bit and more in depth at that meeting, since it doesn't seem to be a very sensitive time crunch.
So you are in favor of approving the vision, but then looking more in depth at the goals in November. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I like that. I like that a lot. Does anyone else agree or disagree? Does anyone else want?
Libby agrees. That's what I was trying to say.
Thank you.
And I agree as well.
Okay, I'm sorry because I don't see your comment in the chat. I'm so sorry when I pulled that up. Other comments? Does anyone else have a comment? I mean, I think we all probably could come up with examples of what we think equity is right now. I don't know if you want us to do that, Mr. Jasper, or if you would rather us discuss that in November.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd be very happy to, if members of the committee had ideas they wanted to share with us now, because I would think as a minimum that would indicate things that concern you and are priorities for you. So, that would be a great start for that for us. I would have to say that, it's the nature of these things is we will ultimately have to prioritize. What transaction can't do everything. Beginning to build a consensus as to what the most important equity areas are will not only help us, if we're going to develop a measure or measures, if it will maybe also validate that the core value approach would actually be preferable. So starting that conversation this evening would be extremely beneficial to us. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
John, go ahead. I'm sorry, Councilmember Steele.
No problem. I was just going to give a quick reaction. I'm very comfortable approving the vision statement and having further conversations, but I would also encourage us to consider what COG has recently passed and teed up. I know several of us are on the Chesapeake Bay Committee, and we're going to be discussing equity at our November meeting and how we intersect with what COG has laid out in their foundation. And so I feel like over the next several months, there's going to be a lot of regional discussion around this word and how we operationalize it. And as a quick note, the city of Fairfax is working with the Carter Center to go through a discussion of nomenclature. We talked about it last night, and I personally attended their inaugural session for elected officials, which was absolutely fantastic discussion and conversation on this particular issue. So I think there is a lot of information coming out and being shared. And so I do think, Mr. Jasper, that the vision statement is fine by me, but I do think you're going to need a little run time for us to start to understand that word in its full context. I spent 3 full Saturdays and Wednesdays with folks, and I'm just beginning to slowly understand some of the word. So I've got a long way to go myself. Thank you, Mayor Colbert.
Councilmember Steele, when is that meeting in November? Is it before the PCAC meeting on the 18th?
It is the Friday before Thanksgiving, if I recall correctly. So I think it's right after this meeting, if my calendaring is remembering correct in my mind. But I do know that staff at COG is working at what the big COG body is expecting of all of the committees within COG and how they fit together, because I was on a call last Friday with them about that.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Okay. Other comments?
Madam Chair,
Yes, I can't see everybody, so please go ahead.
this is Councilmember Friedrichs from Herndon.
Okay.
I just want to return to the idea that that a proposed vision is, by its very nature, intended to be a aspirational yet not too specific
Right.
statement. And so I think that it would probably help the staff if we approved it as soon as possible and then worked on, as everyone is saying, the sequential components. And I also want to say that I'm very impressed by the idea of the two dual ways of incorporating all of the goals into the transaction analysis, including the performance-based planning and the core values. Because as someone who's run a nonprofit, I know that if you have values or if you have performance measures that are hard to quantify, having another way of expressing them is key. You're doing all kinds of wonderful things, but you can't really express them numerically. So the two things, I think the staff is doing a great job. Thanks.
Right. Yep, I agree. Thank you. Other comments? Okay, so I think we can vote then on the, if somebody wants to make a motion on the vision.
I move we approve the vision.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there has been a motion and a second. Mr. Jasper, would you like, should I do a roll call vote or all in favor? Or vocal?
I don't know.
Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. That's fine.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find my.
You could try to see if there's anyone opposed and go from there.
True. Good job. Good thinking. Is anyone opposed to this motion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. That motion passes. Okay. Mr. Jasper, would you like us to discuss equity now, or should we move on?
Well, I'm aware of your impending commitment. We do have on the agenda a demonstration of our Nova Gateway dashboard, but that is something we could defer to a subsequent meeting. If that is okay. It's only listed as an information item. I think from my perspective, the priority would be any feedback you can give us at the moment, at least on equity issues that you would like to prioritize. Ms. Backman is also on the corner, and she's probably got a few MBTA updates she'd like to share as well.
Okay.
So we can skip the demo of the dashboard to save time this evening.
Okay. All right. Why don't we go to Ms. Bachman first, and then we can perhaps come back if anyone has any further comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would note that the authority at their November 12th meeting, we are planning to get several presentations, one being on the status of the B-Trans update. And B-Trans, of course, is the long-range transportation plan that's developed by the Commonwealth through the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investments. So they are giving an update. We are trying to make sure we stay on top of this because there is a direct correlation and linkage to V-Trans and then the funding of smart scale projects. Additionally, we are scheduled to receive two presentations that are that go hand in hand. One is the I-495 Project Next briefing, and then the I-495 American Legion Bridge Transit TDM study update. I believe all of these products that are being developed by the Commonwealth are out or will be out for public comment. So we do want to get these in front of the authority and encourage localities to participate.
Okay. Was that it, Ms. Bachman?
And just one more thing regarding the
Sure.
General Assembly session. Of
Right.
course, the session has, well, I won't say technically ended, but they have done their work. We're being told that the governor is waiting until after the elections to sign the budget. At this time, it appears that there were no bills in play that impacts the authority and our funding. I think last month we spoke about the revenue sharing program and the proposal to, use revenue sharing as a way to fill in some of the funding gaps that the Commonwealth sees right now. But it's very important to note they are not defunding any projects that have revenue sharing monies on them, but some of the projects are not ready. And we have asked the Commonwealth, Nick Donahue and John Lawson, the Deputy Secretaries of Transportation, to provide a list of the projects they've identified in Northern Virginia which they think are not on track. This is very important to us, not only because we do want to make sure that the localities know and that there's that communication regards to the projects, but additionally, some projects that the authority fund with the regional revenues, localities do use revenue sharing as a matching source. So we want to make sure that we have that information. And Madam Chair, that's all I have for you this evening.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bachman.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I have a little more time. Does anybody want to discuss the equity and have examples of that? We can also just wait, since we've already passed the vision, we can wait and discuss that at the November meeting more in depth after we go back to our communities and find more examples, talk to people. Are there any requests or comments on that?
Madam Chair, could I try again? I think it's better now.
Yes, you sound great now.
I figured it out. I'm so sorry. Yeah, just quickly, I typed a whole bunch in the chat, but I understand the TPB adopted an equity resolution. We did in Arlington. So maybe staff could put together some of the equity resolutions that have been adopted, and that equity resolution might serve as a structure. We kind of work that through a little bit because we have time to work through. I mean, the devil is in the details in this, and we need to make sure this is more than just nice sounding words. But so if we can work it every time a little bit, and maybe a resolution is kind of a way to start. So I just suggest that, and I apologize for my technological problems. Thank you.
Okay, no, we all have them, no doubt. So it kind of sounds like we all maybe should go back and do a little homework and be ready at the November meeting to discuss the equity a little more at the next meeting. So that sounds good. And it looks like our next meeting is Wednesday, November 18th. And is everybody good with that on the 7th at 7 p.m.? I know we had to move a meeting. And do we have our December meeting, Mr. Jasper? Is that one set?
Mayor Colbert, the November meeting is actually, we are proposing at 6 p.m.
I'm sorry, I missed what you just said.
So for the November meeting, we are proposing to start at 6 p.m.
Okay, 6 p.m. Excellent. Okay, that works. And do we have a December date?
And that would be December the 16th.
December 16th, also 6 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, there are no further comments. Any further comments before we adjourn? Okay, good night, everybody. Meeting is adjourned. I will see you all in November.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay. All right. There you go.